First story: The Hunger Beneath Hollow Pines. I never believed in the stories my grandfather used to tell about hollow pines. I thought they were just old man's ramblings, drunken tales meant to scare kids into staying out of the woods. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. My name is Jacob Miller. I grew up in a small town called Red Hollow, somewhere in the backwoods of Pennsylvania. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your name, and secrets were buried deep, sometimes quite literally. About 2 miles out from town stood the Hollow Pines, a forest so old that even the oldest folks in Red Hollow didn't know when it first grew. And beyond that forest, hidden behind the black pines and tangled roots, was an abandoned patch of land where an ancient cemetery once stood. No one visited it anymore. They said the ground was cursed. It started when my friend Danny went missing. He was supposed to meet me by the old Miller Bridge one evening, but he never showed. Search parties went out, but they didn't find a trace. No footprints, no torn clothes, nothing but broken branches leading toward the hollow pines. The night after Danny vanished, I heard scratching at my window. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but when I peeked through the curtain, I saw a shape standing at the edge of my yard. It was tall, thin, and pale as bone, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. I blinked, and it was gone. Grandpa was the only one who didn't act surprised. He sat me down and told me about the old days, about the settlers who built Red Hollow on cursed ground. "You ever hear of the Hollow Hunger, boy?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Them uppers, they ain't dead. They sleep beneath them pines, and they wake when they're hungry." I didn't sleep that night, or the next, because more people started disappearing. A woman named Claire who worked at the diner, a teenager named Mike who liked to hunt in the woods, gone. The town got real quiet after that. Folks started locking their doors before sundown, nailing crosses above their windows. But I couldn't just sit there while my friend was missing. I made up my mind. I would go into Hollow Pines and find Danny. I left at dusk with nothing but a flashlight and Grandpa's old hunting knife. The deeper I went, the darker it got, even though the sky was still faintly orange from the setting sun. The trees in that place grew twisted, their trunks black and gnarled. I found strange markings carved into them, symbols I couldn't understand. Bones, small and brittle, hung from the branches on strings made of braided hair. And then I found the old cemetery, or what was left of it. Crumbling headstones half buried in dirt and roots, names worn away by time. The ground smelled sweet and rotten, like fresh earth mixed with something foul. That's when I heard it, a low growl, wet and hungry. I turned, and standing there was something that used to be Danny. His skin was stretched too tight, his mouth was full of long, needle-like teeth, and his eyes, they weren't his anymore. He lunged at me, and I ran. I didn't look back, not even when I heard more of them crashing through the underbrush. The uppers, pale, hollow-eyed things with long limbs and faces like stretched leather. They crawled out of the ground, from beneath the graves, from holes in the earth like maggots from a corpse. I don't know how I made it out. I stumbled back into town at dawn, bloodied and half mad. Nobody believed me, not at first. But then the disappearances got worse. Whole families gone overnight. Red Hollow became a ghost town in less than a month. The state came in, called it a gas leak, fenced off the area. But I know the truth. I know what lives beneath those trees. Now, I sit here alone, writing this down because I can feel them again, scratching, clawing at the walls. They're hungry, and tonight, they will feed again. Second story, whispers past the wheat field. Second story, whispers past the wheat field. It started with a dare. Late July in rural Missouri was the kind of heat that made the air hum. The town of Elmsford, if you could call it that, had 2 gas stations, a post office that never opened on time, and one bar that smelled like old sweat and forgotten promises. But what it really had, what the kids whispered about under breath, was the Harrow House. I had just turned 19, back home from my first year at college, bored out of my damn mind. One evening, we were drinking warm beers in Ricky Mather's barn when someone brought up the old place. "You won't last 10 minutes inside," said Chase, one of those guys who thought being loud made him brave. 10? I laughed. "I'll spend the night." They whooped and cheered, and just like that, I was in. The Harrow house sat just outside town, surrounded by endless wheat fields that swayed like they were breathing. No one farmed them anymore, though. Folks said the ground had gone bad, sick. The house itself leaned slightly, like it was tired. Weather-beaten, windows broken, roof sagging in the middle. But it still stood. That was the strange part. It should have collapsed years ago. I brought a flashlight, a pack of cigarettes, and my dad's old hunting knife. Just in case. I climbed through the side window around 9 p.m. The inside smelled of mold, mouse droppings, and something else I couldn't place. Sweet, like rotting fruit. Dust swirled in my flashlight beam. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. Every step I took made the floor moan. Upstairs, I found a room with a child's bed frame rusted at the joints and a broken rocking horse. I set up on the floor nearby and turned off the light. That was my first mistake. At exactly midnight, I heard it, a whisper, too soft to make out words. It was coming from the wheat field. I turned on the flashlight and moved to the window. Nothing, just endless stalks moving in the wind. But then I noticed there was no wind. Something moved between the rows. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I backed away, heart racing. The whispering got louder, filling the room, but there was no one there. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was inside. I bolted down the stairs but froze at the bottom. Every wall was covered in names. Hundreds, maybe thousands, carved deep into the wood. I ran my fingers over one near the door. It said Carolyn, August 1963. Another said Dale Rivers, October 1982. My flashlight flickered. The whispering grew into a chant, soft, slow, relentless. Then I saw it. A figure in the hallway, tall, impossibly thin, like stretched leather wrapped over bone. No face, just a mouth, wide and cracked open, whispering words I still can't describe. My body refused to move. It raised one hand and pointed to the wall. There it was. My name, Evan Cole, July 29th, carved fresh and bleeding. I ran. The thing didn't follow, not in the way you'd expect. It just stood there, watching, mouth working endlessly. I stumbled through the wheat field, the stalks clawing at me like hands. By the time I reached Ricky's barn, I was screaming. No one believed me. Of course they didn't. But I checked the Harrow house the next morning. Cops said no one had been there in years. They laughed at the names on the wall. Said I imagined it. Except, 2 weeks later, Chase went missing. Then Ricky. Then Carolyn's younger cousin visiting from Kansas City. All of them gone. I left town, tried to move on. But last week in my mailbox in Denver, I found a note. No return address, no handwriting, just 4 words etched in familiar shaky letters. You broke the circle. The whispering started again that night. It's here now, in the walls of my apartment, in the water pipes, the vents, the dark spaces under my bed. I know what happens next. The house doesn't need a location anymore. It follows the names. Third story. Whispers beneath the harvest sky. I never liked the fields behind our old family house in Mill Creek, Indiana. Even as a kid, I would cross the street just to avoid walking too close. There was something wrong with that land, something that made the wind feel colder and the silence too loud. I thought moving away would bury those feelings, but last fall, when my uncle died and left me the house, I came back, and everything started again. The first night back, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked like bones shifting under the floorboards. Around midnight, I heard it, a soft knocking. Not at the door, from the back window facing the cornfields. 3 soft knocks. I froze in bed, heart hammering. The fields were empty, I told myself. But when I peeked through the curtain, I saw movement. A figure, half hidden among the tall stalks, standing completely still. I should have left then, but I didn't. The next day, I asked around town. Folks in Mill Creek don't like talking about the fields. An old man at the diner, Earl, muttered something about the harvest man. Said he comes when the crops are high and the sky turns that deep gold before sunset. I laughed it off, but Earl just looked at me with dead eyes and said, "Don't look at him too long, son. Don't ever answer when he knocks." That night, the knocking came again. 3 times. This time louder. I tried to ignore it, but my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Answer the knock. My hands trembled. I turned off the phone, pulled the blanket over my head like a scared kid, and I waited. By morning, I found muddy footprints leading from the back porch into the kitchen. My heart nearly gave out. I lived alone. The back door was locked, but those prints were there, heavy, wide, like boots caked with black soil. I decided I had to burn the fields. I bought gasoline and matches that same day, but when I got to the edge of the crops, I couldn't move. The sky had turned that strange golden hue Earl mentioned, and deep in the field I saw them, figures standing between the stalks. Dozens of them, all facing me, all deathly still. I ran back to the house, locked every door and window, and called the sheriff. Sheriff Daniels said he'd come by, but he never did. The phone went dead after I heard him scream. That night, the knocking came again. This time, it was all around the house. Every window, every door. I heard whispering too. Low, hungry voices calling my name over and over. They knew me. They had always known me. I grabbed my keys and ran to my truck. As I drove through Mill Creek, I noticed every house was dark, every street empty, like the whole town had vanished. The road out of town twisted and turned, but no matter how far I drove, I kept passing the same broken sign. Welcome to Mill Creek, a town of rich soil. Over and over. That's when I realized I never left. The fields had me. The town was part of it. They wanted me to see. I slammed the brakes when I saw him standing in the road. Tall, thin, a face like cracked earth and eyes glowing faintly under the harvest sky. The Harvest Man. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up back in the house, the sun shining through the windows like nothing had happened. The fields looked normal again, but now there's a new knock from inside the walls. I can hear him whispering my name even now as I write this. I can't leave. No one leaves Mill Creek. Not really. And outside, the fields are growing taller again, ready for the next harvest. Ready for me.